Well, good morning. It's happy Friday to those of you who are on the East Coast or in the U.S. Been a busy week. I hope it's been a productive week for all of you folks. I appreciate you letting me take last Friday off, but we'll try to catch up today and try to cover topics from the last two podcasts. I wanted to start, well, first, some house cleaning stuff. For your questions, there's a bubble icon at the bottom of your screen that you can tap, and that'll take you into a chat session. Once into the chat session, then you can ask your questions from there. So if you've got questions, please tap that chat icon button and enter your question in that chat window. Let me share some content. And let's see if I can pull this up. There we go. So hopefully you'll be seeing it pretty soon. We've had some issues with my PC this morning, so I'm hoping we get through this without any problems. So I'm hoping right now that you're seeing a slide that talks about getting started. Let me go up one. There we go. There's some key, I think, components to starting a software delivery evolution. And it begins, and at the center of all of this is organizational commitment. I know when I joined Compuware a few years back, one of the keys to its success with regard to transitioning to a DevOps-centric or an Agile-centric software delivery environment was the commitment that the organization had at the top. And it doesn't mean, that you got your thumbs pressed, making people do things a certain way, but it means providing the education and providing the support and encouragement necessary to undergo a major initiative like this. So that organizational commitment is the most important aspect or attribute of modernizing your software delivery environment. Once you've got that, then there's some things that you need to do in order to make this successful. And I think it starts with understanding what your problem is or what problem you're trying to solve. A lot of people will begin initiatives like this without an understanding of exactly what they're hoping to accomplish. They do it because it seems to be the cool thing to do, or it's what the trade magazines are saying that you need to do. There needs to be an identified problem that you're attacking, and it may be velocity of output. Are you producing software at a pace that will support the business? And so, is quality an issue? Know your problem, and so then you can begin to attack that. Second thing that I tell folks is that you need to know your current state. You need to understand your existing processes. You need to understand, the tool chains that you're leveraging today in order to satisfy your software delivery requirements. And so I encourage people, and we talked about this in the podcast, to do a value stream map of your SDLC, to map out that process and to determine where there are latencies, where there are problems, where there are issues in that process with regard to the identified problem. And so knowing that current state, how you operate, is going to do two things. It's going to help you with targeting where to begin in your evolutionary journey, but it's also going to help you with knowing where your problems are. And so knowing that is just critical. The third thing I tell folks is understand what your constraints are. Is it education? Is it technology? What's holding you back? What's preventing you from building a modern software delivery environment? The next thing I ask people to do is to define success. So if you know what your problem is, and let's say it's velocity, let's set some organizational goals, business goals with regard to that SDLC. Let's say we want to improve throughput 10%, 15%, 20%, whatever that number is for your organization and what makes sense. So define success. Another key attribute is, and we talked about this at length, I believe strongly that one of the keys to successful software delivery is having a dedicated team. I've heard conversations about, well, you want to start with a dedicated team and you want eventually that to evolve or roll into the actual groups. And there is logic to that. I understand that thinking. And you do want people within the organization who can maintain their pipes in their process and support their tooling at an application or at a team level. But my belief and my understanding, my experience over the years tells me that there's constant change in the technology that can be used to support software delivery. We certainly don't write code or deliver code the way I did back in the late 70s and the 80s and the 90s. There are different technologies, different tools to support that, and it will change. There are different processes. You know, back in the early 80s, we didn't know what Agile was. Now, I tell people all the time, good programmers, I think, have always exercised those type of attributes and characteristics, but formerly we didn't know what it was. So things change. And so if software delivery is critical to your organization, you want to stay on top of those changes. And I think that requires a dedicated team. And that team doesn't have to be big. It can be small depending upon the scale, complexity of your organization. But there needs to be dedicated resources who are committed to delivery excellence and efficiency, because I think all of us would agree that software is becoming more and more critical with regard to the support of business as the years move on. So having a dedicated team, just like you've got a dedicated team for your critical business applications, will be critical and important. And then finally, as you begin that journey, starting or targeting that first team, I think, is important. Beginning with a team that will allow you to refine your processes, software delivery process, to tweak your technologies, to make sure everything's working properly. One of the things that I've seen fail in organizations is where you buy tools and then you deploy them out to your developers with maybe some minor education, but there's not the testing that needs to take place. It's rolled out maybe all at one time. It becomes overwhelming, and developers have commitments that they are required to deliver to. And so in a lot of cases, they'll leave the new stuff and go back to the old stuff just to get their job done. So I believe that you start with a team, not too complex, not too simple, but fairly representative of the organization. And you start with a project on that team that will allow you to build and tweak and refine an efficient software delivery system. So I think that's very important. Managing that environment, we talked about that. I think, again, as I just described, you've got to manage that software delivery system like you would any other business application or business system, with the same type of commitment, the same type of support that you see. In most organizations I go to, there will be departmental organizations within the company or within the entity, and there will be teams within that. There are dedicated members to support of specific value streams within the organization. There will be other resources that get pulled in as needed. But typically, for at least the most critical business systems, there are dedicated resources. And again, if software delivery is considered critical to your organization, I think it is to most, regardless of what you're doing now, then I think it deserves the same type of commitment and the same type of support. Those people will stay busy supporting developers and continually improving, adding features and capabilities to the software delivery system to continuously make it better. And so managing the SDS like any other system, I think is the smart thing to do. And as I said, start small, develop a modern SDS release strategy. You talk about release strategies for the applications that you are rolling out to your customers, to your employees, to your partners. And typically most organizations run under a specific release type policy or strategy. It may be manual in nature. Most, I think, that I see are still manual, but it's still a procedure and a strategy that determines or dictates how software is released to the organization. The software delivery system should be no different. in how it's released to development teams. I think that needs to be managed. I think it needs to be automated where possible so that developers, when ready, can consume new features and new capabilities of that software delivery system. And I think having a release strategy for how software is rolled out is critical. It's so important these days when you've got hybrid type systems where you've got tools, components, software running on multiple platforms, and they have to stay in sync. And so having a strategy, managing that deployment with automation will minimize defects and problems with the deployment process itself. And as you know, that deployment process has gotten very, very complex in the last 10 years, again, because of I think the application architectural complexity. So having a strategy, I think, for delivering the software delivery system to your developers is fundamental. And then the other thing, a piece of advice is that this is not easy. There's some complexity in doing this. Don't give up. Keep going. Fix your issues. Work through the problems. Keep going. You need on that SDS team that's going to support that software delivery system. You need people who don't give up, who are going to work hard. You need that in any aspect of your organization, but it's critical that software delivery system be maintained to work and operate as efficiently as possible. And then the last slide before I get into the questions is I wanted to talk about the iterative evolution of the software delivery system. I talked about this a couple of weeks ago in managing it, and I think this is so important with regard to building or evolving a modern software delivery environment, is that don't try to deliver everything at once. I've seen this problem occur over and over and over again. You know, an example might be what you see here. You know, version 1.0 of your SDS may be, you know, a new IDE integrated with the SCM. I think those are kind of just key or core components to that software delivery. That essentially becomes your MVP or your minimal viable solution. Version 2 of that SDS may incorporate new features like testing, or maybe it's better application understanding, or maybe it's something else. That depends on an understanding of the issues and problems within your current state software delivery. So as you incorporate new capabilities, I'm a big believer in doing it iteratively. And in the last example you see there in this one, you take a good base, which is a good IDE integrated with your SCM. You've got some features that you're using manually. Now you may want to begin to automate the execution of that work versus versus initiating it manually. So leveraging iterative techniques, I think, is very, very important. So let me get out of this and let's see if I can stop sharing. And we'll move back to there we go. This is where I was having problems earlier. Fingers crossed it worked this time. We're back. So again, if you've got questions in the WebEx, if you'll click on the bottom of the screen, you'll see a chat bubble. You can click on that chat bubble and type in your question. And we've already got quite a few. So let me start with one from Suzanne. Suzanne says, can you offer any advice on getting executive buy-in about dedicating resources to delivery itself and not development? Good question. And I answer that, yes, you can. And I think the way you have to propose it to developers is from a business perspective. You can ask the question, well, you know, is software delivery critical to the organization? Is it as critical as some of the other services that the organization provides? You've got, you know, organizations have dedicated resources to retail banking, to commercial banking, to manufacturing systems, to inventory control systems. There are experts who over the years build up expertise and knowledge about a certain topic, and that topic or that value stream is absolutely critical to the business. Well, again, software delivery is, if it's not already one of the most critical business functions, then it's going to be over the next few years. And so having executives understand the value of dedicated support and a dedicated software delivery environment and its importance to the organization should be a motivator for that type of investment. And so that's what I've always worked. It's executives understand, most executives that I talk to understand the value of software delivery in this day and time. And so it's just a matter of getting them to see that that software delivery system is going to evolve, just like any other business system for the organization. And if we want to, as an organization, be competitive and to continue to improve in providing software and software capabilities to our customers and to our partners and to our employees, then that software delivery system needs the same type of dedicated support. Okay, from Myra, you mentioned conducting current state analysis. We did talk about that. Is it more efficient to evaluate all of the software development teams at once, or to do them one at a time as we roll out the SDS or the software delivery system to them? That's a very good question. Here's what I would do. Everybody's got ideas and opinions differ. Here's my opinion. I think that current state analysis needs to be done as part of the prep work before rolling out to a specific team. So if you've got a specific team that's got a project to make modifications to a shop floor control system, if you're a manufacturer, I think that there should be one representative from that shop floor control team, whether they're agile or waterfall, hopefully they're agile, who is part of the planning process with the SDS team for transition or delivery of that SDS to that particular team. And I believe that at that point in time, you do the current state analysis or assessment or mapping of that value stream that they use to deliver software. And at the time before it being deployed to them. And then you've got an up-to-date map of how they're working. And that information will be invaluable as you tweak the SDS to support their particular needs. So, and again, it also depends on where you are in the delivery of that SDS. It becomes even more important if you're at a point to where you're automating a lot of the work within that SDLC. And so doing it real time as soon as possible, or just in time, I think is a smart thing to do. And it'll get easier and easier as you do. I do these mapping sessions with our clients who are looking to modernize their software delivery environment. And one of the first things that we do for customers who do not have that information is to map out their existing processes for their target team that will be getting the software first, and it goes real well because we use that information as input to the next step, which is planning. You'll do a planning session to actually plan out work that needs to be done to the SDS to accommodate that particular team and the subsequent rollout of that software to that team. So yeah, I think it needs to be done at a team level. I think to do it at an organizational level, first of all, it's going to consume a ton of time that could be used in getting the software out to small teams. And things change. By the time you get all that work done, there's the real likelihood that requirements have been changed once you get down to actually start tweaking and deploying that SDS. Okay, from Jeff. Jeff says, you suggest implementing new tools before transitioning to agile methods. Why start with tools before the process? That's an age-old question, and a lot of people feel differently about this. Here are my beliefs based on what what I've seen work in the past. And we did this at Compuware. If you've seen Dave Rizzo's presentation on the 10 steps that he went through to transition Compuware, one of the things that he did was to implement new tooling, a modern IDE. We changed the SEM. We went to, we had a legacy SEM. We went to ISPW. And so we changed the tools to get developers comfortable with that. Most mainframe developers have been doing this for a while, not all, but have been doing it for a while. So they're very comfortable in the processes that they use to develop software and test software and deploy software. Getting them used to the tools actually eased that burden. I've seen organizations who try to implement change all at one time. You can imagine if you're a traditional, typical mainframe developer and you've got a few years under your belt in doing this, to change the process by which work is managed, going from waterfall to agile, and changing all the technology at the same time, trying to implement that, can be overwhelming to that traditional, to that mainframe developer, quite honestly, to any developer, because that's a lot of work. It's one of the reasons I believe in incremental delivery of features and capabilities. It gives you some time to stabilize and to get comfortable with the capabilities and the features. But getting the tools first, I think it speeds up the overall process. One of the problems that I've seen organizations have is that they'll begin their transformation to agile and they'll start using agile techniques. And yeah, I've seen this work, but so I don't want to downplay it completely. But I've also seen where they'll implement agile, but then they're still using traditional tooling to execute on the work being managed or delivered through an agile management system. And that can be difficult. You think about a traditional legacy SCM and its non-support for parallel development. Well, if you're moving to agile and you're trying to shorten work into tasks that can be completed in a 2-week sprint, the way you work is going to be different. Certainly the way you test is going to be different. So leveraging existing tools that you've used for waterfall type software development is going to be difficult. And so getting people comfortable with the tools under a process they're comfortable with, and then introducing agile as fast as the organization can absorb it, I think it's just a smarter way to go, and I think will minimize or reduce the overall implementation curve for a software delivery modernization project. Stephen, how difficult is it to initially translate our current software delivery processes into sprints and stories? I'm not sure I understand that. What I think, if you think about current software delivery processes into sprints and stories, when I talked about it a couple of weeks ago, when we talk about sprints and stories, what I'm talking about is the work required to build out your software delivery system. And so, version 1, as you saw on the slide earlier, may be the implementation of a new IDE integrated with your SEM. And so the sprints, the stories, the tasks that I refer to there are about the build out of that version 1 release of the SDS. And not necessarily the stories and sprints associated with actual project development work that the users of the SDS are going to be doing. Two different things. Managed the same way, which is part of what I've been telling folks for a long, long time. I think that you use those agile techniques to manage the build out and the deployment of the software delivery system, just like the sprints and stories, tasks used to develop or evolve or add features, capabilities to any other system. So it's kind of an apples and apples thing. It's just two different projects. One is for the development of the SDS. The other is for the development of whatever project you're working on. And so that's how I see that. Let's see, from Matt, Matt asks, do you see a lot of growing pains with organizations, problems getting the first team or two on track so the SDS can be scaled? That depends on the organizational commitment that we talked about in that first slide, Matt. If you've got organizational commitment and organizational understanding of what the benefit of this is, typically it's not hard to find a team that's willing to take this on. There will always be naysayers. There will always be individuals that that are reluctant to change, and I understand that to some respect. I mean, a lot of these people have been very successful in delivering software, leveraging techniques that they've been using for 30 years. And I talk about this a lot. And when I talk to clients, it's not that those processes were bad. They produce good software, evident by the fact that it's still running 30 years later. The problem is that we've just got to do it quicker in order to compete more effectively. Marketplace is changing. And all of us in the software business have got to get better and faster at delivering capabilities. So I think that's just absolutely critical. Okay, from Charles. Charles asks, what benefits are gained by mapping the current state SDLC value stream? I love that question because I'm a big believer, and I talked about this already, in having an understanding of your current state processes. Mapping out that SDLC, which is essentially what you're doing. For those of you who are familiar with value stream mapping, typically it's done at a very high level within the organization to look at the different value streams for that organization. It's done by consultancies like McKinsey and others who do a lot of executive type consulting. But there's value in going through the same exercise at a sub level. And so one of the things that we've done, I've been doing for 12 years, almost 15 years now, is when a customer is looking to modernize how they deliver software, then one of the first exercises is we've actually got a workshop at Compuware that we use with clients who want that kind of help. We go in and again, it's with a targeted team, and we'll actually work with that team to walk through their software development lifecycle. We'll take the developer, will determine what work is being done by the developers and by the testers. We'll understand what the handoffs look like within that software delivery lifecycle, because typically there are those. You'll move from business to architects doing design work, to developers, and then to testers, and then operations folks. And it looks a little different in every shop. But going through that value stream mapping exercise to document those processes in supporting technologies, and to understand where there is latency maybe within handoffs. What does that latency look like? Is it 2 minutes? Is it 2 hours? Is it 2 days? Documenting that information provides so much data that can be leveraged as input for the project of evolving or building out a modern SDS. And so we'll use those maps. And I use traditional value stream maps. There are templates all over the internet that you can get. Typically, we've got some software that I use to produce those maps. And we just use a workshop interview type session to capture that information. Customer agrees on it. Once we're all agreed on the process and identification of the supporting tools and the time periods, I typically track setup time, execution time, and cycle time. Cycle time is the combination of my setup time and my execution time. And then I'll look at wait times for handoffs and things like that. And once that's documented, you'll have a real clear picture on where your target areas are, and where you want to focus on in the SDS very quickly. Now, most times, most organizations already know where the problems is, quite honestly. The value stream mapping exercise just gives you the ability to document that, and it's something that you can leverage or use with management or with the executives in acquiring investment potentially or things like that. It's just a good way to use data to help you in your migration or your evolutionary planning for your SDS. That's how I use it. I love it. I think it's a good tool. From Neil, what is different regarding a typical planning session for building, evolving a software delivery system compared to any other business system application? What is different regarding a typical planning session? No difference. Easy answer. It should be essentially the same. If you're using a Scrum planning session to determine work for that particular Scrum, you're pulling information from a product backlog and into a Scrum backlog, and then you're in that planning session, you're taking that work that's in that Scrum backlog and you're applying it to certain sprints to execute work. It is absolutely no different. It's one of the things that I love about this. I think it's so valuable is that in the, when you get ready to start a software delivery modernization effort, you're going to go through the same exercise. Hopefully, one of the things that I start with and is to have a product backlog, establish a product backlog for the SDS. Again, if it's a critical business application, then it should leverage all the same strategy that you're using to manage feature addition, capability addition to any other existing business critical system. And typically that begins with a product backlog and subsequent Scrum backlogs to support the work that needs to be done or to manage the work that needs to be done. It is no different from the standpoint of a software delivery system. I believe that there should be a product backlog for that software delivery system that defines all the work, capabilities, requirements, features that are necessary to support efficient, effective, high velocity, high quality software delivery, software development. And in that backlog, that becomes the basis for work to be done. Now, like any other backlog, it has to be cleaned. It has to be work has to be prioritized. There's some planning that occurs with regards to identifying, what goes in sprint 0 and sprint 1, sprint 2. At Compuware, and I like this approach, we don't plan beyond typically, I want to say 12 weeks. And typically it's a little shorter than that. I think the same should be true in regards to planning for the build out of the software delivery system. So using those backlogs to track work, manage work, and then using planning sessions to define what work needs to be done in each sprint. And again, just like any other critical business system, work needs to be defined in time increments that can be accomplished in a traditional 2-week sprint or whatever sprint time period that you're using. But it's the same exact thing. Is my point, Neil, and I think that's the way to go. It shouldn't be any different. It's, again, software delivery system is just another system, and critical one. And let's see, the last one I've got right now is from Melissa. Melissa says, why not begin use of the modernized SDS with the most complex business application? You can. Again, my belief is that you want a project that will help you build a great SDS and initially. And then it will be the purpose of that SDS to be the software or the critical systems that it will be used to build and add capabilities and features to other systems. And so I believe that initially you want to minimize the complexity with regard to the work being done so that you can focus on stabilizing and building the most effective software delivery system that you can. And again, I tell folks, you don't want the easiest one, but you don't want the most complex one either, as far as projects are concerned. You want something that's going to test the capabilities of the software delivery system, but you also want something that will allow you and give you the time to ensure that software delivery system is working properly one of the things that you do not want to do in the implementation of any new software, and this is true whether it's a business application or a software delivery system, is to provide software that's not working properly. Yeah, I've seen that time and time again with clients where there was not enough effort spent in the planning or the rollout of a particular tool or an understanding of the requirements that the users had for the particular tool. It was rolled out, and the expectation is you'd be 25-30% more productive with it without really understanding whether the tool's capabilities align with the user's requirements. And so that work needs to be done in order to roll out and to build a successful SDS. Because again, this is an investment that the organization's making. Let's get it right. And let's get it right as early as possible. So starting with something that will give you the opportunity to get that SDS stabilized and operationally efficient will be critical. You get those small successes as you're rolling this out, and if you with that, then you'll be able to scale and you'll be able to roll out to other groups. They'll be more receptive if they know that there's success behind it. And so I think to do that, then you choose wisely with regard to the projects that you begin with. Okay, that's all the questions. We've been going about almost 40 minutes. So I don't see any more questions, so we will wrap it up. I appreciate your time today. I appreciate you joining us. I hope it's been informative. I hope it's been useful. If you've got questions that maybe weren't addressed here or other questions that pop in your head at certain times, you can always send me an email at rick.slade@compuware.com, and I'll be glad to answer them. I hope you will. I enjoy talking about this, as you can see. So you can send me emails that way. You can also, there's a hashtag good coding on Twitter that you can leverage. You can send me direct messages there. And then there's always our webpage where you can get information about the podcast that typically drops the week before. And that information, as well as information on the live Q&A, is at compuware.com/goodcoding. So we will wrap it up this week. Again, thank you. I appreciate you tuning in. This is interesting. Again, I'm an engineer. I like to get in front of clients. I like to talk about the problems, and I like to create solutions for those people. It's a little harder in this, but we'll open up soon. My best to those who have experienced suffering from this virus, and sympathies to those folks. But we will be back, and I'm looking forward to that day where I can get out to your shops and talk to you face to face about these things and about building modern software delivery platforms, the SDS. Thank you. Take care. Good coding, everybody.